I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is January 22nd, 2014. Tonight's live edition, I'm going to be getting into two topics mainly. I might get a little sidetracked here or there, as I have a tendency to do when I go off on rants, but I'm going to be getting into two topics mainly. Basically, I'm going to be debunking the lies about the Syrian war, or the latest lies, I should say. And I'm going to be throwing some information, some truth out there for you to see the drastic difference between what's going on and what's being actually said. That's going to be hour one, because there's this ramping up of, oh my God, we need to invade Syria, humanitarian crisis. We'll get into that. And then hour two, because there's so much fear, and I see it being put out on a constant basis, by the media, and people are lapping it up and buying into it. People really are getting sucked into this, I'm scared of my own shadow, a acorn falls from a tree and makes the slightest noise and people are jumping out. It could be Al-Qaeda inside the acorn. It's just Al-Qaeda is not inside an acorn, okay? I promise you. It's not hiding in your sock drawer. There are bad people. Right now, Al-Qaeda happens to be in Syria, which we'll be getting into. But they have everybody operating on this fear vibe, You see it from the way cops deal with people, as the way they opposed to, how they did 20 years ago. The way they deal with people's dogs, they just shoot and kill them now, as opposed to how they did maybe 20, 30 years ago. The rise in SWAT team raids, the war on drugs. I mean, you get cops violate people's rights all the time. For instance, a guy was detained for wearing Google glasses. Why? Because somebody in the audience, the camera that sits in the audience that you can't see, infrared camera, can tell when you're recording. That's how they catch people copying and pirating videos. So it picked up the Google glasses. The guy wasn't recording, but it picked up that they were on. And the person watching the camera for such activity contacted the MPAA, who immediately contacted Department of Homeland Security, and they sent out the FBI to pull the guy and his wife out of a movie theater and detain him and interrogate him for 2 hours, only to realize that he had done nothing wrong, and then they apologized and gave him 4 free movie passes. That's the new America, where their fear, the movie theater, the MPAA, the copyright police, we talk about There wasn't even fear of terrorism. The fear that the guy may have the Google glasses on, even though there's no sign that expressly prohibits him having said Google glasses. And I'm not defending them, but even though there's no specific sign, any verbiage up on the wall that says, no, you cannot, you cannot have Google Glass at all, period. Not you can't have the recording device on. The guy didn't. He wasn't recording, which obviously would be the same thing as having your cell phone out recording. So if he's going to get bothered by the FBI, literally Homeland Security, okay, sent the FBI to go hassle him, if he's going to get harassed by them for having Google glasses, then everybody that has a smartphone should be harassed as well because they have a camera. And if the guy wasn't recording, he wasn't ripping anything, right, and you just thought he was and you thought he was lying, well, then anybody with a cell phone could be lying too, right? Maybe they have a hidden camera that can't be picked up by the infrared camera that you have aimed. Maybe they have something to beat it. How do you know? I mean, if they're that nefarious, so how come you're not going after everybody else? Why don't we just set up a checkpoint at the movie theater now? We'll have a SWAT team there, and that way if anybody's found to have any type of recording device, we can just shoot them on sight because they must be a copyright terrorist, right? Right? Well, that's the America we live in right now, and that's funneled by fear. Their fear, the powers that shouldn't be, the copyright police, whatever, the artists, whoever, the movie theater, Homeland Security, Homeland Insecurity, they should call it. That's all driven by fear, so we're going to get into that. But that's hour two. So first I want to get into the insanity that is going on with Syria. So what's going on with Syria? Well, what's going on is they want to invade, the powers that shouldn't be, want to invade, and their excuse for chemical weapons, well, Assad called their bluff. Now, it does take a weapon out of his arsenal if he was ever invaded. And people would say, well, that's kind of effed up that you would say that because there would be American troops dying, Popeye. Why would you say that? Well, you have to understand from a militaristic, I can't speak tonight, from a strategic standpoint, I should say. If you look at it, that just takes a weapon out of his arsenal in case they wanted to, makes him a little weaker in case there was an invading force, right? But he called their bluff, said, no, you can take the chemical weapons, so they had to back off. Now they have new pictures showing how there's torture and killing of civilians by government troops, and we know it's government troops. Well, how did you get the information? Well, it was smuggled out by an insider who hopped the fences and could not take the blood and the torture of the Assad regime. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure they probably torture people. I'm sure they do so to extract information. I'm sure some of the people that, some of the torture methods that they've learned, they were probably taught by somebody connected to the United States government or military at some point in their career, or the information was passed on along from someone to someone. That's the way it works. Wouldn't surprise me if the government tortured. Okay? Wouldn't. But our government tortures. We condone it. We had the White House attorneys, the Bush admin attorneys, rewrite law so that way torture was okay. It's put inside TV. So, hey, torture's A-okay. So I thought I thought that torture was bad when I was a kid. I was told that it's wrong, but okay. So America tortures. So now we're going to use this as an excuse to invade again and throw, a leader out of his country. By the way, who are we to throw anybody out of their country? Who are we? I have friends that are in the military that get pissed when I say this. They're like, dude, what are you talking about, man? We're the United States. Yeah, again, who are we? Is there a proclamation from the creator somewhere, a plaque on the planet that says the United States is the keeper of the planet and everybody has to do what they say, and if you don't, you're in violation of the rules? I don't even see that in, trying to be to a certain extent, but I don't even see religious leaders trying to outright profess that. I mean, they do, but they don't say that there's a plaque or, they say that, well, it's from God and blah, blah, blah. And they have to sit there and give you 15 different translations into why that means that we should be the world's police and protect everybody and blah, 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 blah. But who the hell are we to be butting into anybody else's affairs? Realistically, let's stand back. Let's take any emotion, anything. Who the hell are we to be telling the people of Syria who they can have as their leader? John Kerry went to the peace talks today, and Geneva too, and he said he opens, pretty much, they open up with, well, Assad can't be involved in the Syrian government, period. He has to go. Well, he is there because the Syrian people want him there. Well, no, there's a legitimate movement against him. Yeah, but that's not who you guys are backing. You guys are backing Wahhabist terrorists. Wahhabists, Saudi Arabia, the same people that threatened the Russians and with terror attacks if they didn't back off of defending Syria and being a roadblock for an invasion. And when Putin wouldn't back off, they were threatened, and then he didn't back off still. And what do we have going on before the Sochi Olympics? Oh, we have all these terror attacks, and of course, it's Russia, blah, blah. Really? It's amazing. All these terrorist groups, these Chechen groups, they from what I understand, what I got from that threat was, hey, look, we can control them and keep them in check, but if you don't play ball, we'll just tell them game on. And it looks like that's what they did. Gave Russia handful of things to deal with, especially right before the Olympics. They're dealing with that, and then Geneva 2 comes up. It makes one wonder if they did that to give Russia a ton of crap to deal with on their plate, so that way Syria isn't on the forefront. Perhaps maybe they can sneak something through. That's how politics is done. Got to pay attention to stuff like that. Anyway, let's get to this audio clip, the first one I want to rip into. It's Wolf Blitzer had a representative of the Syrian government, and I won't say regime. I hate that term, okay, because that almost legitimizes them wanting to invade the country or, the regime. It makes it sound bad. So I'm going to say the Syrian government, because you could call the Obama administration a regime if you really wanted to. He's a tyrant. So, you really want to start throwing that term out there, we can. But I don't like to push mind control propaganda that they're trying to push. So we're going to say the Syrian government. Anyway, this representative from the Syrian government goes on Wolf Blitzer's show, and she actually, held her own against Wolf. And I want you to hear it. I'm only going to interrupt it minimally, but she deserves to get the airtime because what she said is true and factual. And of course, he had to interrupt here and there, and I'll interrupt to point out his lies and stuff. But here we go.
Let's get back to one of our top stories right now: the Syrian peace talks that finally got underway today in Switzerland. But a war of words broke out as the parties to the conflict vented their anger, their hatred, their venom. Looming over the talks, the continuing savagery of this 3-year civil war. We must warn you that some of these graphics you're about to see are very disturbing.
2 or 3 minutes.
And Buthena Shaban is joining us now from Montreux in Switzerland, just outside of Geneva. She's a senior advisor to the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. I want you to listen to the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, because he made it clear today at the start of these so-called peace talks that there can be no role for Bashar al-Assad in any transitional government, that Bashar al-Assad must simply go away. Listen to John Kerry.
You cannot have peace. You cannot have stability. You cannot restore Syria. You cannot save Syria from disintegration as long as Bashar al-Assad remains in power.
In exchange for peace, is Bashar al-Assad ready to leave office?
I'll let her answer this for a second, but again, we come off like, oh, he's got to go. But says who? Because Wolf Blitzer's standing there with his beard and his white hair and his glasses. See, he frames the argument to her right off the bat. Is Bashar al-Assad ready to leave so all this bloodshed can stop? See, they're framing it's a straw man argument. It's his fault. None of this would be going on if just this evil dictator would leave and let us come in and control things and install a puppet dictatorship. Really, because things have worked out so well for Libya, right? Yeah, that worked out real well.
And give up power.
I think you should ask a different question, Wolf. In what right does John Kerry say to Bashar al-Assad, you can't save Syria, you can't stay in Syria? Can we do that to your democratic country? Ask your president not to be there and not to save his country and not to be in power? Is it John Kerry who should say that? Or is it up to the Syrian people to decide who should be their president? Isn't it a democracy? Shouldn't it come through the ballot box or through what John Kerry says? Isn't this colonial, what John Kerry said today? To me, it's very colonial.
But are you suggesting that there's real democracy in Syria right now?
Well, do you think there's real democracy in the United States when they deal with countries like this? In Syria, there is a war. There is a horrid terrorism. The Syrian people are suffering a huge deal. There is a lot of bloodshed. But I can say that the interference of countries, namely Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United States, has caused the Syrian people, their institutions, their lives, their security, their peace of mind.
The accusation,
so I think what we need from countries is
the accusation against your regime, your government, is that more than 100,000 Syrians have been killed, that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, have been placed in exile externally, internally, and that war crimes are being committed. You've seen these awful pictures that have been released in the past few days. Our own Christiana Amanpour showed the world some of these pictures, and this international group is suggesting this is systematic torture, war crimes.
She's also a member, not this lady, the Christine Amanpour, however you pronounce her last name, CFR, stooge. Just saying, she's globalist. Total and complete. All for the whole one world government agenda. Don't be fooled by that woman at all. Don't think she does objective, independent reporting at all. Educate yourself as to who she is. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but she's not a reliable source. And again, that's where this information is coming from. It's being broken by her through CNN, through a quote-unquote defector, and then you'll hear Wolf say, well, the images came from, forensics investigators and stuff, and former, police officers or whatever, and it was put together, and then this defector smuggled that out and gave it to us. But how do you know, Wolf, that it was actually all that happened? Well, because the defector told us. But how do you know he's not lying to you? Well, because he's a defector. He wouldn't lie to us, right? Curveball comes to mind. Anybody know who Curveball is? That's the guy who they based all the information off of for the invasion of Iraq. Oh, what? Yeah, people should go look up Curveball. And then it came out that the guy said that it was his fault and that he lied, right? Because the intelligence community probably didn't tell him right before they turned on the camera to say that, as they had the producer, who's probably a CIA agent, off camera with a gun in his hand during the interview. But the guy, Curveball, came out about 1.5 years ago and said that it was, he lied and made up things. Of course, it was his fault, and the government just believed me because they were willing to, which to a certain extent that does happen. But I don't think it was that simple. I think there was more to it, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. Anyway, back to the audio.
Created by your government, and I want you to respond, because these pictures are awful, and I want our viewers, we'll show the viewers some of these pictures, to be warned, young people should not see these images.
These are not only pictures for me. These are real people who are being killed by terrorists, who are being kidnapped, who are being raped. I have hundreds of stories to tell you about what's happening to my people. But you really have to be in Syria to know who is doing what. One can't be in Washington, Christian Amanpour, or in New York, and then decide who is doing what. Remember the chemical? Now, Massachusetts has announced the study that all what has been circulated about the chemical was absolutely unfounded about the Syrian government.
She's talking about the supposed chemical weapons attack, the last quote-unquote provocation and excuse for them to invade another sovereign nation. Oh, we have to go in. We have to kill people to save them from being killed. What? So people understand, invasion does not mean cupcakes and unicorns that fart rainbows and everybody sings Kumbaya. It means death, people crapping themselves as they slowly bleed out and die. Kids watching their parents get their faces and heads completely blown off. Parents watching their kids get their heads and faces completely blown off. That's what an invasion and war is. It's not summer camp. It's not day camp. This isn't a freaking joke. So remember the last provocation for war they had? That's what she's talking about. The chemical weapons attack. MIT just came out and said it's mathematically impossible that the chemical attack was launched from a government area. And I'll play audio about that in a few minutes. But I want to get this in. I want to get as much of this in as I can so I can get the other audio in for you on the other side, because I know I'm going to have to finish this clip up on the other side, because as I usually do, I interrupt things. Anyway, back to the audio.
We have to acknowledge that there is a huge campaign against the Syrian government for the last 3 years. And the aim is not the Syrian government. The aim is the destruction of Syria, the destruction of the Syrian people for only the benefit of Israel. That is the true story that is happening in Syria.
But these pictures were collected by war crimes prosecutors, forensic experts. A defector from your government came out with all these pictures saying these crimes were committed by Syrian government authorities.
This is simply a huge, huge lie. And remember, it was the 21st of August, the chemical. Now Massachusetts announced the study. Wait for 3 and 4 months, and then you will know the real story. You know, the problem is that the Syrian people have been victims of so many lies circulated in order to justify this horrid war that has affected our lives, affected our country, that horrified our people, that trying to create an ethnic conflict, trying to create a religious conflict in a country that has been a safe haven for refugees throughout its history.
On the chemical weapons, there's negotiations. The U.S., Russia, others have been involved. Are you saying that your government was not involved in creating and storing weapons, chemical weapons?
I'm not saying my government has, what it hasn't. I'm saying my government has never, ever used chemical weapons. I'm
going to stop it there for a second. You see what he did? You see what he did? Tried to create a straw man argument. She said the reports about our use of the chemical weapons against people and that attack that they were using as the provocation to invade and have a no-fly zone, remember a couple months back? MIT just came out with a report. The Russians came out with a report a couple months back, but MIT here in the States released a report saying it's mathematically impossible. They had to have come from a rebel-controlled area, and the area that they came from was rebel-controlled. And they show, and again, I'll get into that audio. So that's what she's referring to. And you see what Wolf Blitzer did? Because most of the listeners who don't understand logical fallacies, and they don't, once you understand it, you guys know you'll see it. You just automatically see it. But a lot of the people that watch CNN still don't. You see what he did? He changed the frame up. He said, so what you're trying to tell me is Syria is saying that they never manufactured chemical weapons? See? She didn't say that. She said we didn't use them on civilians. And she amends that. This lady, this representative, is very on point. She's very smart. You can tell she knows how to hold her own, and she could see what Wolf was doing. She was very on point. Some people get caught up by this. But that's why they have people like Wolf Blitzer to do what they do, because, as I've said, that's what their job is. So you see, you just heard him try to frame the argument. She was discussing, again, the chemical attack that the government, our government, and along with Saudi Arabia and others, was trying to use as a pretext for invading Syria a couple months back. Remember, I was going off about this, as were many other people, okay? After the Russian report comes out, the MIT releases a report that recently even proves that, no, impossible that Assad's government did it. And that's what she's referring to. And he goes and he creates a straw man to try to frame it. So most people are going to go, well, those chemical weapons are getting destroyed now by the UN. Look, oh my God, Assad's government's trying to lie. They're trying to hide things. Oh my God, I wonder what else they're doing. See, that's how a straw man argument's created. And that's what it's created for.
Chemical weapons were used by these terrorists, and we know the countries who had been helping them. It is a terrible crime what's happening against the Syrian people, and it is basically through foreign intervention, Saudi, Turkey, and unfortunately with the support of the United States. There's one man in the United States who's misleading the United States about what's happening in Syria, and I think you should stop him. It shouldn't continue like this.
Who's that man? Who are you talking about?
I'm not going to name him. You know him. Everybody knows him.
Everybody knows who. You're talking about the President of the United States, the Secretary of State. What are you suggesting?
Everybody. No. I'm not talking about that level. Everybody knows who is trying to manufacture so-called opposition. Those people who we saw today in the meeting room have not been to Syria for the last 30 years. They have nothing to do with the Syrian people. They do not represent anyone from the Syrian people. I don't know whether they represent some kidnappers or some criminals. I don't know who do they represent. I think you should ask who do they represent. If you take them to the Syrian people and try to ask them to go through election, I don't think there are 5 people in Syria who would know them or who will elect them.
Are you talking about Syrian opposition leaders, the rebels as they're called? Is that what you're talking about?
The ones we saw inside the room today are not opposition leaders. There is a genuine national opposition inside Syria and outside Syria of people who would not accept this destruction to go on, of people who care about Syria, who care about the country, who care about the people, but unfortunately these people were not invited.
I'm going to pause it right there because the break's sneaking up on us in about 30 seconds. And you can go research this. A lot of the people that were involved in the opposition to the Assad government, right, the genuine opposition, have since turned and they're fighting with them, because you have foreign invaders coming in, the terrorists, Al-Qaeda, the quote-unquote rebels. And there are Syrians that do get brought up into it, but, 95% of them aren't Syrians? Something like that. It's a ridiculously high number. We're right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get right back into it. I want to finish up with Syria in the first hour so we can get into my topic of fear in the second hour. Let's get right back to it.
Well, you're now in Geneva together with these opposition leaders. Are you ready to negotiate, to talk to them and try to work some sort of a ceasefire, if you will, or some initial steps to end the bloodshed?
The United Nations said there are over 240 different groups fighting in Syria. The question is, these people, can they stop any of these factions fighting in Syria? They are not opposition leaders. The people who say to you in the United States that these are opposition leaders, they are misleading you. They are not leaders in any sense, neither in a social sense nor in a political sense. But what can we do? We want to solve the problem in our country, and it is an expression of goodwill on the side of the government that we accepted to come to Geneva. But truly the solution for Syria should be made by the Syrian people inside Syria, not in Geneva.
So what do you hope should emerge from these talks in Geneva right now? Because you're sitting down with these Syrian opposition leaders.
Yeah. Well, what we hope for is that everybody would decide that the interest of Syria, that the interest of the Syrian people should be put above everything. And we hope that countries who are supporting Wahhabi thinking, Wahhabi trends, who are supporting terrorism, will stop supporting it. Wolf, listen to me. Wahhabism is not only a danger to Syria, it's a danger to the entire world. You don't need Osama bin Laden to come next time, or somebody like Osama bin Laden. What we are facing in Syria is a very, very dangerous mentality that is destructive to the modern thinking, to the modern world, to the coexistence, to living together. It is extremely dangerous. The least thing the West can do is to support the Syrian people against this horrible Wahhabi extremist Qaeda thinking.
And when you hear the opposition say that your government, the government of President Bashar al-Assad, is engaged in systematic torture, war crimes, brutality, crimes against humanity, and that they should be charged with these crimes by the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands, what do you say?
I don't know, Wolf. What do you say when you look in the mirror and those questions are posed to you? What would you say? Because everything that you just accused the Syrian government of, the United States government is responsible of. Don't think so? Maybe you should go listen to my archives if you're a listener and you're not sure, you're new. Go to federaljack.com, go listen to my 3+ years, going on 4 years worth of archives now. And go listen to all the shows I've done about the Iraq War. Soldiers talking about war crimes. I've done over 20 hours worth of shows. In fact, go to federaljack.com, download section, go to the reality of war section. Most of the evidence is there. Download everything in the reality of war section. See it for yourself. He should have looked in the mirror when he asked that question. It's amazing. You see, another form of projection, right? Oh, Syria, they're doing all these horrible things, torture and war crimes, illegal behavior. What are you guys looking in the mirror?
My answer to them is come to Syria. Live there, travel there, work there, and you will find out for yourself who is the criminal, who is kidnapping people, who is raping people, who is, who are gangsters on the roads and in cities and in towns. I mean, it is really, sad to see some Christians here, while Maalula, the only place in the world who speaks the language of Christ, was destroyed by these terrorists. 11 nuns are still kidnapped by these terrorists, and yet you see somebody who is a Christian who's supporting these terrorists. This is truly sad. The world should know the real story, Wolf, believe me. All what circulated in the media, or most of it, to be accurate, most of what circulated in the media has nothing to do with what's happening in Syria. I've been living there for the last 3 years. Of course, I've been living there always, but I have not left Syria during this crisis, and I know exactly what's going on. I love my country. I love my people. I only want what is best for my people. I wouldn't stand here and talk to you unless I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Muthaina Shaban is a senior advisor to the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. Muthaina Shaban, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf. Lovely to talk to you.
Dirtbag. She stood her own. She did a good job. She stood her own. But you can see what he did. And yes, I threw an ad hominem at the end there because Wolf is a dirtbag. He completely tried to manipulate that. See, again, ladies and gentlemen, it's not so much, and this is what the guests of these shows don't get. Sometimes they do. But you're not the focus. You're not the target. You're window dressing if you're the guest. See, the audience, the viewers, they're the ones that's the target. See, it's all about perception, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter if you really see, well, I mean, it does, but according to them, it doesn't matter that you see the truth. It matters that you see the picture that they weave, the picture that they paint, that they present to you. That's why she would respond, and you could see, that's why they have people like Wolf who know how to manipulate and create straw man arguments and things like that, because if they had put a weaker individual up against this lady, they would have failed. And they probably had a pre-interview with her and realized that she was had enough presence of mind that it required somebody like Wolf and not maybe a stand-in or somebody else. And they do that, by the way. They do that in pre-interviews. A lot of that is done for gauging the intelligence of the person if they're going to have them on in an adversarial type of way. And I don't know if they did a pre-interview. I'm just telling you what I know. I'm just sharing my knowledge with you so you can see through the lies. So let's get to the evidence. First, the report that she was talking about by MIT and that I mentioned earlier. I have an audio piece. Of course, we have to go to Russia today to get this because you can't get this from our own government, of course. But I digress. Let's go to the report by MIT.
The U.S. conclusion that a chemical attack near Damascus in August was carried out by the government has been challenged by a team of highly respected experts. Washington immediately blamed President Assad, but a new report from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology found the rocket couldn't have been fired from government-controlled area.
We went through 2 to 3 months worth of study to determine the types of rockets, the weight, the size, the propellant, and we determined that the range is on the order of 2 kilometers. I'd like to make a note that the UN also had come up with a range of approximately 2 kilometers. So this is very confusing to us in our studies, and we're trying to understand exactly what the White House map means, because right now as it stands, these rockets could have never been fired from government-controlled territory. they would be fired more from a rebel type of territory or a border of a contested territory.
And RT's Alexei Gerashevsky looked into the MIT study. Let's now get more details from him right now. Hi there, Alexei. So it appears something in the U.S. conclusions doesn't seem to match up. Tell us more.
Well, indeed, this is the mission of this report, to answer a question whether the missiles were actually fired from the parts of Damascus controlled by the government. Now, we reproduced the very same map which the Washington officials presented when they voiced the concerns that the attack could have been carried out by the government troops. Look, if we look here, this is the part of Damascus controlled by the government at the time, which was, of course, the 21st of August 2013. And this is the part of Damascus controlled by the opposition troops. So if we can see those blinking yellow spots. Those are the areas where the missiles carrying the sarin gas hit the ground, causing some deadly damage and reportedly hundreds of casualties. And this red line here is basically to signify how far could these rockets go if they were fired from the parts of Damascus controlled by the government. As we can see, the closest, the westernmost point of attack of the sarin missiles is some way off from the maximum range of missiles, this particular type of missile, which was used in this attack. As we heard from Mr. Lloyd, the maximum range of these missiles is about 2 kilometers. Well, this point here is at least 4 kilometers from the easternmost point of the government-controlled areas of Damascus at that time. And if we talk about the heart of this area controlled by the government, which was mentioned by the U.S. State Secretary John Kerry, that's at least 8 to 9 kilometers from the easternmost point. Now, if we also must remember that there were areas closer to the government-controlled areas in the western Ghouta region of Damascus, which were also allegedly hit by the sarin attack. But in both of these places, the UN investigators did not find any substantial environmental evidence to prove that the attack was actually carried out, although there were some victims in this, the victims of the sarin gas attack in this area. Now, the one issue which the authors of this report are raising as to why the U.S. intelligence used this particular map even before the UN investigators reached the site to hold their own investigation. But the U.S. authorities were already quick to jump to conclusions. Let's remember what the U.S. State Secretary John Kerry said back then.
High confidence. This is common sense. This is evidence. These are facts.
This latest report is not basically attributing blame to any side, but it sticks another boot into the accuracy of U.S. intelligence and even alleges that Barack Obama could have instigated another military action, this time against Syria, in a similar fashion that George W. Bush did against Iraq. Official Washington hasn't yet responded in any way to this latest report.
Alexei Gerashevsky.
Of course, official Washington hasn't responded to the report. I'm sure they'll come up with a response. The reason why they haven't responded is they haven't figured out some sort of logical sounding argument that they could put out there, because you're dealing with MIT after all. So they probably won't respond at all, because their propaganda won't work. When you're going to go up against mathematicians, what are you going to send your propaganda mouthpieces that couldn't find their ass with both hands in a well-lit room up against somebody from MIT? No, they'll just ignore it. La, 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 it does not exist. If they acknowledge it, I'll be surprised. What we really need is a media, well, of course, they don't have, they rarely have press briefings anymore, but next White House press briefing, perhaps, or next time they try to announce something on Syria, and if they take questions, perhaps if we could find a journalist with some testicular fortitude in this country to ask them about it, maybe that would do the trick. Anyway, I want to play the other two pieces of audio. I want to fit them both in here, and then we're going to move on into hour number 2. So let's get to 2 pieces of audio for you. One, the second one has some of the same audio, but that's because the first one used a snippet from the first piece. The second one is the full video clip that I want to play for you from Human Rights Watch that went into Syria. But first, I want to play a news snippet for you. It's from a different alternative news outlet. But I want to play this clip for you because they lay out the truth about, and you can find that it's a YouTube channel called Truth Loader, and they laid out the truth, plain and simple. And I would suggest you watch the videos. Just look up on YouTube, Syrian rebels kill 190 civilians. There's 2 separate videos that show up. More than likely will be the ones that show up. And those are the 2 that you're going to hear the audio from. So let's get to the evidence, because this is important for you all to hear. So here we go.
When I was in Latakia countryside, people came up to us, and they described in detail finding dead relatives either in a mass grave or in their homes in the village.
On the 4th of August, at least 20 opposition groups in Syria began a military offensive in the Latakia region on the Turkish border, in which at least 190 civilians were killed and more than 200 hostages seized. These hostages are still being held by 2 jihadist groups who took part in the offensive, the now notorious Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, and the lesser-known Jaish al-Muhajirin wal-Ansar. The vast majority of these hostages are women and children who were not involved in any fighting.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar!
Although this offensive began more than 2 months ago now, the extent of the abuses has only just been revealed following an on-site investigation by Human Rights Watch. And the group believes that this is the first evidence of members of the Syrian opposition carrying out war crimes and crimes against humanity. According to a report released by Human Rights Watch on the 11th of October, at least 67 of the victims were unlawfully killed in or around pro-government Alawite villages. Human Rights Watch is yet to determine whether the remaining 123 dead civilians were killed unlawfully, but it says the high civilian death toll, the nature of the recorded wounds, which includes multiple gunshot and stabbing wounds, and the presence of 43 women, children and elderly among the dead, all suggest that opposition forces either intentionally or indiscriminately killed most of these 123 victims. In some cases, residents of the villages affected in Latakia report opposition fighters gunning down or executing entire families. And Human Rights Watch says that the scale and pattern of the abuses suggest they were systematic and planned as part of a deliberate attack on a civilian population. In other words, the deaths most likely did not result from civilians simply getting caught up in the crossfire. These deaths were planned. It is not yet clear exactly which of the 20 groups involved in the offensive were responsible for the abuses committed. But Human Rights Watch believes that 5 were the main fundraisers, organisers and executors of the attacks. These include Ara al-Sham, the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, otherwise known as ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, Jaish al-Muhajirin wal-Ansar, and Sukkah al-Iz. Other attacks carried out by ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra have been well documented on YouTube, and you can watch other videos we've made about these groups on the left here.
So there's one small example. And although this is horrible, you say 190 civilians, that's a small example? Yeah. Unfortunately, 190 civilians dead at the hands of these people that we're arming, by the way. Check out all those vests and everything that they're running around wearing. Plate carriers, camis. Check out some of the weapons that they have. Nice optics. Nice weapons. Hey, where'd you get the money for that? Where'd you get the weapon? Oh, CIA. Oh, Benghazi. Why do you think they don't want to talk about Benghazi? One of the reasons they don't want to discuss Benghazi is because Benghazi was gun running. Remember, at the time, there was no, we're going to help the Syrian rebels. They hadn't openly said that they were going to help or anything. They were denying that they were doing anything behind the scenes. And here, they were running guns through Libya to the Syrian rebels, because the same rebels that fought in Libya I thought they were Libyans, but the same rebels that fought in Libya now became Syrian rebels. Interesting. Rent a terrorist. Rent a rebel. Just call the CIA. But that's what they did. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. I know. Kind of sounds like Iran-Contra. I know, I must be a conspiracy theorist. Oh no, I'm just a student of history. Here's the other piece. Here's the actual piece from Human Rights Watch.
When I was in Latakia countryside, people came up to us and they described in detail finding dead relatives either in a mass grave or in their homes in the village.
اللي هن بيكونوا مرتك وابنك. مرتي وابني ايوه. كيف قتلوهم؟ قتلوهم كويس. وهلا بتروح بتشوفي دمي كما استاذوا لهلا دمي. دمهم وين؟ بتشوفي بالبيت. بالبيت. تعال شوفي. يلا. أنا وراك.
On August the 4th, at dawn, over 20 different armed opposition groups launched an offensive campaign in Latakia countryside. They then entered the villages and began going from house to house. In some cases, executed residents, in others, shot at residents that were desperately trying to flee. The villages that they targeted are Alawite villages. Baruda was the site from which government forces were shelling opposition strongholds. Taking Baruda and neighboring Alawite villages would be a shot into the heartland of Assad's stronghold, coming that much closer to Assad's hometown of Qardaha, and that much closer to Latakia city, an area of strong support for the government. These villages are on the front line of what is an increasingly sectarian war between government forces and opposition forces. When we arrived in the countryside, what we saw was that village after village, homes had been destroyed, homes had been burnt, and that the population was by and large not around. One of the homes that I visited in Baruda was that of Hassan Shibli. Hassan Shibli told me how he had to make the difficult decision of fleeing in the morning hours of August the 4th, leaving behind his wife and his son who was paralyzed.
شوف الطلقة هي هون وهون. طيب ده معروف. طلقات. هاي طلقة هي الرصاص شو كان هون بيري. هاي هون وهون وهون. والدم طير.
He says the marks are clearly visible. Here are the bullet marks, here and here. His son was paralyzed, laying in a bed, and these Wahhabist terrorists, Al-Qaeda, Syrian rebels, came in and they executed this dude laying in the bed. Freedom fighters. The guys were backing.
We looked into statements and videos posted by opposition groups that were involved in the offensive. I was able to identify what looked like Hassan's son's bed. I then showed a screenshot of that video to a local resident, and she identified that person as Safwan Shibli. She also told me that the person that appears seconds later in the video was Safwan Shibli's mother. We know that she was killed after that. We identified...
And when you see the video, you see his mother was an old lady who required 2 sticks to walk, 2 walking sticks, 1 in each hand. And as they walk her out really slowly, they probably lined her up against the wall and shot her. But they're freedom fighters.
More than 185 civilians killed during the operation. This was based on witness testimony, as well as photo and videographic evidence. The footage and the photographs help to corroborate information that we receive from survivors, but it also helps us get a fuller picture of what happened on that day. One of the patterns that emerged was that opposition fighters were systematically killing adult men and trying to keep women and children alive to hold them as hostages. According to opposition sources, there are now over 200 residents from the area held hostage. We're not just talking about a few rogue actors. We're talking about a pre-planned, meditated, pattern of abuse that was intentionally undertaken. These abuses do amount to crimes against humanity. By identifying the perpetrators of these violations, we are trying to ensure that all individuals will be held to account. We are calling for an arms embargo against groups that were responsible for fundraising, planning, and commanding this operation. The individuals or countries that are supporting these groups are now on notice about the types of violations that they are committing and could be complicit in war crimes and crimes against humanity if they continue to support them.
Makes you think. Are we being told the truth about Syria? Is John Kerry maybe lying to us? Is President Obama lying to us? No, President Obama could never lie to us. If the truth ever came out about all this, the gun running through Benghazi, and that's one of the reasons that's no, don't touch that, because that's linked to what they want to do. You see, if Benghazi blew up and the truth came out the way it should, do you think that they'd be able to push for an invasion of Syria? No. It'd be very unpopular because it would be attached to that. They know that. So that's off limits. You can't touch it. Everybody says, why won't they talk about Benghazi? What are they hiding? It's because they pulled the protection. No, see, that's another red herring. They get you to think the whole conspiracy is about whether or not the ambassador had protection. No, the ambassador was there because they were running guns. Okay? For whatever reason, if Obama wanted to sell it out, and I guarantee you, if that was the case, what they probably wanted to do was have that October surprise type of scenario, and it probably went wrong, and that's one of the things that they're trying to cover up. But again, it would link it to this gun running, weapons running to the Syrian rebels, back when they said they weren't doing it. By the way, when they run guns, they also run drugs. No, they only run one or the other. No, they don't. Sometimes they run them in the same crates. Sometimes they cushion the guns with the drugs. That's the way it works. All these secret operations have the same thing. Drugs, guns, and black operations. Vietnam was a black operation. Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. I've played the audio before. Go back and listen to my show from late November. I think it was 11/26, somewhere around there. I played audio from him. Vietnam was a black op. This Afghan war is a black op. Most of Iraq was run like a black op. But Popeye, they were right in front of your face. Yeah, sometimes the best place to hide a lie is right out in front of everybody. That's how con men get away with things. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll be back in 3 short minutes. We get back, I'll be setting the mood for cutting through the fear. Stay tuned.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
President John F. Kennedy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. Hell yeah. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw fingernails that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You gotta look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're gonna see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're gonna see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're gonna do the same for him. That's a team. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals. Ideas are beautiful.
Welcome back to hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen. I'm dedicating the rest of the broadcast, the entire second hour, to amping down the fear vibe. I'm doing the exact opposite of what the mainstream media does, because it's just getting out of control. I've done broadcast in the past. Again, go in my archive section, federaljack.com. There's different ways all over the front of the page, whether it's through the download section or right from the front page. There's a link to the downloadable archive page and to the archive section. Go listen to the different broadcasts I've done dissecting fear in the past, okay? And yes, to a certain extent, like keeping you safe on a primal level, like from sharks or things like that. Okay, I guess being afraid to get your arm eaten off and having that kick your bitten off, I should say, and having that kick your adrenal glands into high gear, or if there was a lion or something or an animal or something. Okay, I understand, how it developed and what it's for, but so does the powers that shouldn't be. They understand it too. And it's that understanding of it that is manipulated and used to manipulate you. People don't even realize it. So we're going to dedicate the second hour of the broadcast tonight here to covering that, breaking it down for you. Again, go to my archive section if you want to listen to the older shows I did on fear. I mean, I did a bunch of them dating back to 2011, so you're just going to have to scroll through the different sections. But find them and listen to them. I did a bunch of them. One of them is titled Deconstructing. In fact, if you just go on Federal Jack and type in Deconstructing Fear, that should bring up one of the episodes I did, or at least one or two of them, and listen to them. They're really good broadcasts. But anyway, I digress because I have a bunch of audio that I want to get played for you and a limited amount of time. So first I prepped the field for you with that first piece of audio I played for you. We all know there's a vast conspiracy. Yes, it looks hopeless and, oh my God, we can't do anything, so we should just be afraid of them and fear. Or fear whatever, Al-Qaeda, or fear. Or the cops. Oh my God, we have to fear everybody else but cops because we're at a war with scum in this country. Fear. I could go on, but we all get the point, right? Okay, well, this first piece of audio I want to play for you is a snippet from the film Kymatica. Again, go watch Ben Stewart's movies. I've had him on before. I'll have to hit him up again and get him on again. I interviewed him just a couple months ago. It's in the archives. But he did 3 great films. All of them I have available on YouTube on various different channels. Look up Esoteric Agenda, that's the first one, Kymatica, which is the second one, and then Ungrip, which is the third one. But Ben's a good friend of mine and a good friend of the broadcast. In fact, actually, he was my very first interview about 6-7 years ago. The very first interview I ever did where I went out and just didn't even have any formal training. Just we found him, got in touch with him, and yeah, interesting. Anyway, I digress. So back to the clip I want to play. It's talking about the false ego. And again, to understand it in full context, go watch the movie Kymatica. But this has to be played so you can understand, because I'm going to talk about growth, protection. This is how they manipulate us. So we're going to go over the basics, and I'm going to go over again how we're all manipulated via these different methods. And again, I've talked about this stuff thousands of times. You've heard me mention Dr. Bruce Lipton. Well, you're going to hear Dr. Bruce Lipton tonight. So let's get into the first piece of audio. Here we go.
The messages encoded in the scriptures and ancient archaeology came from adepts of spiritual science. The intent was to teach the initiates the deeper meaning of these myths. What became later termed as Lucifer, Satan, or the devil was representative of the ego, which rivals the Lord, the representative of the self. The true self is the epicenter of a person's entire being. It is the total sum of everything that we are. The false ego, on the other hand, is the idea and concept we create about ourselves in the course of our lives, which typically excludes any qualities we don't wish to accept about ourselves. Cancer begins with a group of cells within a community that fail to communicate with the conscious signal of the organism. Those cells begin to grow out of control and spread to other areas of the organism.
Now, I'm going to pause there for a second. I've done this before. I've actually, I did an even more in-depth broadcast on this where I played more clips than this, but that's an important thing to point out what he just said. Cancer grows. He was explaining how it grows. Again, that and other diseases come from a breakdown in communication inside the body. If you look at our government, or not even, let's not say our government, or let's look at our country, I should say, of everybody. Each individual person is a cell, just like the cell in your body, right? So our country is like a big human body, we'll say, made up of all these different tiny little cells. Micro, macro, law of correspondence, as above, so below. That's why the Masons use it. So we're looking at the country as a larger picture of what goes on inside of our own body with disease, right? So breakdown inside communication inside the body, disease occurs. Same thing happens, breakdown inside the body of the country, the people as the whole. Breakdown of communication, not talking to one another. Why are we not talking to one another? Because we're afraid of each other. Because we think everybody's frigging Al-Qaeda. Everybody's a boogeyman. Your neighbor could be a terrorist. And it's been bred out of us over the course of time. It's not cool to be that friendly neighbor. That friendly neighbor is looked at like, wow, that guy's weird. Why does he want to talk to me? Why are those people nice? It's called community. Real community. But nope. That's looked at as strange, odd, breakdown in communication. They want to cut the communication of the internet. And you can look at that at different levels, whether it's the government trying to literally cut communications with the internet, or Facebook now blocking, like 90% of your viewers from seeing things you post. It's a breakdown in communication. And what happens? A breakdown in communication leads to problems. And that's what's going on with this country. That's how they manipulate us. They understand the law of correspondence. They understand how everything affects everything else around it. I know some of this might sound new agey to some people, but it's not new age. No, I don't. I've exposed new age stuff before, and I've talked about that, so that's not even a valid argument. This is the way it is. The powers that shouldn't be understand this, and this is how we're manipulated. My goal is to have you see this, understand it, and then you go on your own quests. That's your own. Where your path leads you, that's your path. I just want to give you the information. Again, don't believe me just because I tell you. Go out and research it for yourself. But back to the information. So where we left off was, again, the breakdown in communication causes disease inside the body.
Disease is evident in our world today. The cancer upon our earth is the domination of our false ego and our divorce from nature. The cancer upon our earth is the domination of our false ego and our divorce from nature. Every act of hatred and destructiveness in our world begins with self-hate and self-destructiveness. And it all begins with a breakdown in communication.
By the way, that's also, if you were listening last night to the Martin Luther King Jr. episode I did, right in the beginning, one of the guys that was talking about it, he said, yeah, it's easy to blame the man Hoover, but Hoover's an extension of us. What do you think he was talking about?
Think of any position of power that you believe to be above you. Royal families, government leaders, the United Nations, financial organizations, corporate monopolies, and media juggernauts. These are all facets of our false ego. They are the physical advent of our own sickness. They require our conscious participation, our conscious energy to survive. Because without our cooperation, without supplying them with the sustenance of complicity, they starve. Their very nature depends on our desire to be ruled. And a typical symptom of the illness among humanity today is our continuous denial of our illness. Repression. We consistently repress those qualities we choose not to accept about ourselves. This is why it is so difficult to see the false ego and its multiple manifestations for what they truly are. This is the very nature of the false ego. It acts as a red herring to distract us from the freedom we truly have. For this psychic parasite to survive, it must supply us with a chemical that will cause us to remain dependent upon it. In this case, the sustenance is our conscious energy. And in order for us to feed it to the parasite, the chemical of fear causes humanity to crave protection and defense. And if the parasite can control the nature of the fear, it can then create a fear among us that only it can defend us against. It also works the same in every individual psyche. Just remember that the false ego has only one desire, to become greater and more powerful than the true self. This illness causes us to believe that we are separate from nature. This is why we see such a rise in the dependency of technology. This is why we see such little stewardship for the earth and the environment. And this is why we see bigotry, racism, sexism, and every other form of discrimination possible that leads to crime, violence, wars, and eventually, the global destruction of the organism. This endless state of fear, confusion, and segregation our world seems to live in is a symptom of the false ego creating a false threat.
Now, if you look at that, again, law of correspondence, micro, macro. Look at the government as the false ego, the parasite. Or, let's not say the government, because the government's really not a man. It's more anthropomorphized than it should be. It's more of a machine. Let's say the powers that shouldn't be. Okay, they're the false ego. And they need you to buy into this constant drip, drip, drip of fear. And that's what they feed you on TV. And they do that because when you're in fear, which you're going to hear, I'm going to play the audio from Dr. Bruce Lipton in a second. He talks a little bit about in this clip about growth and protection. Now, I'm going to actually I have two clips from Bruce Lipton. One of them I'm going to play on the other side of the break. But it's in fact, I might have to. You know what I'll do? I'll end up waiting to play this because I don't want to. It's going to be just cutting it close to the end of the break, and I don't want to have to cut it off and then replay from the beginning. So I'll wait, and what I'll do is when we come back in on the other side, I'll play back to back this clip from Bruce Lipton, this, and then the next the second clip that I want to play from him, and I'm going to try to just leave them both uninterrupted. So now, maybe I just do the jibber jabber rant stuff now that I wanted to talk about both of them. That way, when I play both the clips, I can leave Dr. Lipton alone and just let him talk uninterrupted. I'm working on getting him on the broadcast. I want to interview him. But anyway, the two clips I want to play, now I've already set it up. You understand the false ego. And again, you're not going to understand everything about what I'm talking about tonight just by listening to the show once. You have to go back and listen a few times, and I urge you to go do your research. Watch Ben Stewart's movies, go do your research on the false ego, understand the law of correspondence, look up what the law of correspondence is. If you don't understand, go listen to my shows with Mark Passio about this stuff. This takes hours and hours of understanding to undo the programming and the mind control that we've been put through. But again, law of correspondence, people say, well, what good is this stuff to me? So what? Well, if you understand this, not only does it affect the bigger picture, the outside world, like, I can make a change. One person can make a difference. You can. But it also affects your everyday life. So anyway, you're going to hear the two clips from Dr. Lipton that I want to play. And it's, as I've talked about before, growth protection. They keep us in a constant state of fear because when you're in fear, your body goes into protection. See, normally when we're just in relaxed, okay environment, not, oh my God, am I going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or some sort of wild animal or whatever, we're in growth. And our blood flows to our viscera, our gut. That's where our growth comes from. It allows you to replenish new cells in the body, new cellular generation, free thought because you're not thinking in a cloudy mind. You have free, clear mind. When you're afraid, your body goes into protection. The blood flows away from the viscera to your limbs. Fight or flight. Flight being your feet, fight being your fists. Or your feet, if you can kickbox and kick or whatever. You begin to understand the basic premise. So you go from growth into protection. You're also not making rational decisions when you're in this protection mode. You're making decisions based on survival. Your decisions are based off of how can I survive at that moment. When you go back and you look at the decisions you made with a rational, clear-thinking mind later on, what usually happens? You look at it and you say, wow, why did I make that decision? You made that decision because you weren't thinking rationally, just like many people weren't thinking rationally after 9/11. Many people were afraid, right? Whether it was lawmakers, whether it was the general public. How about the Boston bombing? I think people were afraid then. People were cheering armed military vehicles driving down their streets. Martial law, basically, and they were cheering it. Why? Because they were afraid. You understand? You're starting to understand this stuff? Look, research this if you don't get it. I know I'll lay it out for you really well, but you need to research this further. Don't just rely on my radio broadcast. Do yourself the favor. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to play these two clips from Dr. Bruce Lipton for you. But I want you to think for a second. I just want you to take 1 second before I play them for you. And I want you to think. I want you to understand something. I'm going to break this down for you. And then I'll play the clips. I've said before how the universe, there's certain universal laws, and one of them is that the universe runs on two vibrations. And if you understand quantum physics, you understand anything, you listen to the broadcast, you'll understand that everything, and you'll know this to be true, even science admits this, has a vibrational frequency. Everything is vibrating, just at a different frequency. Okay, so the universe operates on two different frequencies. Fear and love. Fear and love. See, the powers that shouldn't be, they even lie to you there, and they divert you there, and they get you to think that it's fear or love and hate. It's not love and hate. They get you to think that it's love and hate, and that the opposite of love is hate. That's not true. The opposite of love is fear. The hate comes from the fear, usually fueled by ignorance, which comes from the fear. You see it every day around you. People complain, oh, the government, these older people, whatever, they don't understand, this new way of thinking, whatever. People fear the unknown. I'm sure you've heard that expression, right? Why do people usually fear the dark? Because they can't see. If they can't see, it's kind of like an unknown, right? So the universe operates on these two basic frequencies, fear and love. Now, if you understand again the law of correspondence, micro, macro, look at the universe like a huge outward extension of yourself. That's why when you change things about yourself, you automatically change things in the universe. You just don't even realize it. That's why when people go, well, I can't make any change, so I'm just going to continue to be miserable in my own life and sit here and be miserable. Well, that you're actually helping to perpetuate this prison planet type existence just by thinking like that, because you put that out anyway. So if you understand these two different vibrations, you understand that it's very simple. Look at the macro now. To understand when I say that the universe operates on these two frequencies, look at your body. Growth or protection. Love or fear. Growth is love. Protection is fear. Flight or fight. Think about that. On to the audio clips from Dr. Bruce Lipton.
The functions of the body to survive can be broken down to two basic functions for any organism to survive. You have to be able to grow, maintain yourself, take care of your biology, but you also must be able to protect yourself, so that if you're just growing and you can't protect yourself, you'll become food for something else. So the survival involves a balance between growth and protection. Through the history of human civilization and through human evolution, we recognize that our nature is to be in a state of growth, and that our protection is only supposed to be used to, help us out of that threatening moment. You can't be in growth and in protection at the same time. So the significance is, when we see a need of protection, the stress hormones in the body shut off the blood vessels in our viscera or gut, which is the part of the body for growth. Well, the issue is, if you took the blood from the viscera and moved it out to the arms, then you left no blood in the viscera. That means no growth. But you're ready to fight. And when your fighting is finished, then the blood returns back to the viscera and you grow again. But in the world that we live in today, it's 24/7 fear. So we have a continuous dripping of that stress hormone into the body. It's just dripping all the time, getting us ready to run or fight or flight at any moment at the drop of a hat. We're ready to go because we're on guard. Well, the problem is, what does that mean about your allocation of energy? And it says, we're spending most of our energy in protection.
Which, by the way, I will interrupt it here for a second. What do you see all around you? Oh, we need money to defend from Al-Qaeda and terrorists and homegrown terrorism and this and that, and we have to, police departments need tanks now. It's all about protection, no growth.
You cannot survive if you're in protection all the time.
And if the parasite can control the nature of the fear, it can then create a fear among us that only it can defend us against. A recent physical manifestation of this comes from Zbigniew Brzezinski, former Secretary of State who also supported President Barack Obama. In his book, The Grand Chessboard, he states, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus of foreign policy issues, except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat.
Oh, and Brzezinski's daughter is Mika Brzezinski, seen every morning, Monday through Friday, on MSNBC's Morning Joe. Coincidence? I don't think so.
Even the Reichsfuhrer of the Nazi Party, Hermann Göring, sums up this game of supply and demand perfectly when he stated, "The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders." That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. It also works the same in every individual psyche. Just remember that the false ego has only one desire: to become greater and more powerful than the true self. This illness causes us to believe that we are separate from nature. This is why we see such a rise in the dependency of technology. This is why we see such little stewardship for the earth and the environment. And this is why we see bigotry, racism, sexism, and every other form of discrimination possible that leads to crime, violence, wars, and eventually, the global destruction of the organism. This endless state of fear, confusion, and segregation our world seems to live in is a symptom of the false ego creating a false threat.
Now, why would the false ego create a false threat? Because, as I've explained already, and I will reiterate one more time to hammer the point home in case you don't understand, the fear, the false threat is used to control you, keep you off balance. You understand? You get it now? Good. Now I want to play something that's more of a solution. And again, it's going to explain this. It's my last clip of Dr. Lipton, and it's going to explain this, and I will not interrupt it in more detail. But I need to preface it because some people might say, oh, it's going to, Popeye, it sounds all lovey-dovey. It is going to be lovey-dovey. We're going to talk about love. Not afraid to say the word. I don't know why so many people are. I know why I shouldn't say that. You've been programmed. You've been programmed your whole life. Love sucks. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever. Most of it through media. People go through heartbreak, everything else, but you're programmed to not like the word love. You're not manly if you express feelings. You're not manly if you say, I love you. What do you think one of the reasons I say I love you to all of you every night is? I do mean it when I say it, but I'm trying to lead by example. I'm trying to show the other guys out there, hey, it's okay to be rough and gruff and maybe a little rough around the edges and still say, hey, I love you. We need more of that. We need more guys with tattoos. More rough and tough guys. More spec ops guys. Just more guys in general. Not being afraid of love. I'm not talking about rose petals and all that crap. I'm talking about love. And then women too. Women need to stop being so afraid of it. Oh my God, I'm going to be hurt. Blah, blah, blah. Love sucks. Blah, blah, blah. I hate love. No. That's the vibe we need to put out. Remember, there's only two basic vibes. Love or fear. So if you're not in the love mode, guess what vibe you're in, ladies and gentlemen, even if you don't realize it. And of course, a lot of that has to do with the ever-constant drip subliminally and right out in your face of fear, fear. You need to look through it. You need to see what's going on. You need to unplug that IV and stop being afraid. Start loving one another again. That's the way to stop this. Everybody wants to know the ultimate solution to stop the dark New World Order because things are evolving, so things will be new. But we have a choice whether it's bad or good, right? Everybody says, well, how do we stop it? What are we going to do? Start loving one another. You want the most basic, and that's not the end-all, be-all solution to every problem, but that's the base we need. We need a good foundation to start from. That's the foundation. Start loving one another again. Because that throws off their whole plan. See, their whole plan is based off the other vibe, which is fear. Anyway, let's hear from Dr. Lipton.
It's really interesting to understand the difference in the dichotomy between living in love and living in fear. And it's best illustrated if I put cells in a petri dish and I put nutrients in front of the cells will move to the nutrients. But if I put toxins in front of the cells move away from the toxins. The significance is when you're in a growth situation, which is really what love represents, you're open because growth is open to the world and you assimilate things, and that's where growth comes from. Protection is just the complete opposite. Protection means you're threatened, your life is threatened, and you wall yourself off in protection. So growth is open and protection is closed. Well, the relevance is then you can't be in growth and in protection at the same time. So in our normal history of biology, protection is a necessary part of our survival. Being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you seriously have to do something about this. So what nature has done is created a protection mechanism. In scientific terms, it's referred to as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, very complicated, abbreviated as HPA. And what this really represents is the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that does an interpretation. It looks at the world and says, am I in a safe place or am I in a scary place? If the hypothalamus sees that we're in threat of any kind, it sends a signal to the pituitary gland, the master gland, whose signals coordinate the activity of 50 trillion cells. Well, in the case of a threat, the pituitary gland releases hormones that activate the adrenal glands. The adrenal system is referred to as fight or flight. So it's basically a protection mechanism. So I say, okay, great. The HPA axis, hypothalamus sees the threat, pituitary coordinates 50 trillion cells, and the adrenal gland prepares for a protection response. Well, if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, you're going to have to use your arms and legs to run away or fight what you need to do. So the system, when under threat, releases stress hormones from the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland allocates all the energy of the system to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Well, that means the first thing the adrenal gland activity does is cause the blood vessels in the gut to constrict. This forces the blood, which has the energy, to the arms and legs. But then you have to realize this. The moment you shut down the blood vessels of the gut, this is where growth and maintenance and the necessary control and stability of the body is coming from, the organs of the viscera. So when you're in a moment of threat, you shut down the energy going to this gut because you're allocating the energy to run away. That's one of the first things that happens is we shut down growth and maintenance of the body. And people say, well, growth, I'm an adult, I don't need to grow. And I go, we're made out of 50 trillion cells, but every day we lose billions, hundreds of billions of cells, numbers that are just too big to conceive of, actually, of normal attrition, aging, damage. And so basically it says every day you're losing hundreds of billions of cells. That means by definition, every day you have to replace hundreds of billions of cells. So while you don't see yourself growing, every day you are growing to match what you're losing. So if you shut down the growth of the system, it won't take very long for the system to become in a state of disrepair. Because if you're not maintaining the replacement of those cells, this will lead to sickness and disease. And number two, remember, when the threat is present, the adrenal hormones are released in stress. They shut down the immune system. And this is an effort to conserve energy to run away from the tiger. What's the result of being in a state of protection? The answer is you shut down the growth and maintenance of the body, and you shut down the immune system. Both of these, if sustained for a period of time, will inevitably lead to disease and death. And just to refer back again to the nature of why evolution gave us this protection response, to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. But once you run away from it, once you've made it away from that tiger, then the system goes back into growth again. So by nature's understanding, you're only supposed to use the stress system for very short intervals of time because it interferes with the normal functions. And then you look at today's world and we realize 24/7, 365 stress hormones are being released into the system. We read the newspapers, we watch the news, we're concerned about the world and its unfolding. So what was supposed to be only used for a very short time has now become chronic. And the chronic release of stress hormones has resulted in an elevation of the amount of disease and sickness that our planet is experiencing right now. So the significance is we must recover. And then to recover, it says, we must get out of the fear that we live in because fear kills. It's interesting in regard to the level of health when we're in a state of growth or a state of protection. The level of health is totally a reflection of your vitality. And what we find is just very obvious when people are in love and they express tremendous vitality. But when people are in fear or in protection, the life force seems to be drained out of them. So basically, nature is really trying to tell us to move toward this higher vibration of love because this is nature's indication that you are sustaining your life.
It's very powerful information, ladies and gentlemen. Again, just more proof. When you look at the universe, you look at nature, you look at everything else around you, understand we are all connected. And I don't mean in a Greenpeace, faux, political agenda, Al Gore, man, bear, pig, global warming lie type way. I'm not even coming at you as a hippie. I'm far from it. I'm coming at you as a fellow human being and a member of not only this little blue marble, but this entire universe. We need to stop. Just because these psychos are in power doesn't mean that their plan is well thought out. Yeah, they're global government. They might have it all thought out, and they might, we can just use fear and manipulate society and blah, 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 blah. But just remember, the people that lit off the atomic bomb, the same psychos, okay, the same connections to the same powers that shouldn't be today. Okay, when they lit off the atomic bomb in New Mexico, even though I've talked about how the Germans had an atomic weapon first, that the point is, even though that happened, they lit off that bomb in New Mexico. Okay, the important part to remember is that more than 50% of them thought they were going to kill everybody on the planet. They did it anyway. Okay? So these people, the powers that shouldn't be, their dark agenda isn't always well thought out and well planned, like you would think. A lot of people would think that, they must, and even if it is well thought out and well planned, it doesn't mean it's going to actually work. What's that old expression? The best laid plans of mice and men. Okay? Anybody that's ever been in the military could tell you, you take all the planning that you spend months and months and months doing, and as soon as the first 5 minutes of an operation kicks off and goes underway, most of that planning goes out the window. Okay? It happens. You know how we can fix this problem of fear and being, oh my God, I'm afraid? First of all, we need to face up to the fact that there is a problem. It's like anything else. Secondly, we need to just stop being afraid. And people, when I say this to them, they go, well, it's not that easy. Yes, it is. It's just like any other quote-unquote tough decision in your life. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not coming to you like I'm on a pulpit and that I don't make mistakes or anything. I suffer the very same mistakes or decision-making possibilities that you all do throughout your everyday lives. We're all the same. It's the beautiful part of this. We all go through this the same way. We all have the same different little quirks, the same different little problems that we deal with on a daily basis. We are all the same. But when I dispense this information to you, I do so from a place of, look, I've either been there and done that, so let me help you learn and grow with what I've learned, or I'm going through it right now. And I can, as I'm growing, I want to share that experience with you all, because maybe that'll help you grow as well. Again, micro, macro. And then if you grow inside your own personal lives, without you even realizing it. That little simple change alone changes everything for the good. And these people don't want that. A lot of them, some of these people, and look, again, it's compartmentalized to the point where it's ridiculous. I mean, you'd have to literally get inside of each individual person's head to probably find out why they truthfully are on board with this, that, or the other thing. A lot of them don't know. A lot of them are just useless idiots. The people at the very top, I mean, they want a smaller, it's really simple what they want. They want a smaller, more manageable number of human beings on the planet. Me? What do I want? I want to grow. I want everybody on this planet to evolve. I want everybody to just chill out, start loving one another. Once we get past this, see, like Cooper said, and this is my analysis of it, we're getting closer and closer. You see things speeding up every day, but we're coming to this fork in the road. And honestly, I don't think it's a point where it's just this quick fork. I think it's more of like an eventual arc, and the road is kind of wider, and then the option of which way we're going to go starts to get more narrow the longer you go down the road, and eventually you're going to be forced down one way or the other because of, our decisions. We need to make a choice, like Cooper said. We go total tyranny or evolve and get on into enlightenment. And it's one of the reasons I push this. Okay, I dedicated the whole second hour to breaking this down and covering this because it's important for people to hear the opposite of just the government's doing this, the New World Order is doing that, blah, 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 blah. I talk about so much negative stuff, and so does everybody else. It's important for you all to hear positivity and good information that will not only help you push back this dark New World Order agenda, but it'll also help you in your own personal lives. I mean, it's the simple truth. It really is the way it is. This stuff will not only help you in your personal life, it will help the world. You healing yourself helps the world. You don't even realize it. That's why they keep you in a constant state of protection, no growth. The growth is where the healing comes from. And again, if each individual cell is like that, then the whole body. Now look at the country as a body, and again, each individual person in the country like a cell. Get my point? You understand why we're all fighting with one another? Why there's so much division, and why they have to keep it up? The media, they keep it up. Picture the media like an injection, like a needle, and all the racial division and stuff that they push, like Al Sharpton and all that garbage. Picture that as a toxic chemical inside the syringe and that goes in and attacks the cells and gets the cells, starts to attack the cells by whatever, it causes, we'll say it causes like an autoimmune reaction, and it causes almost like the vaccine adjunctivants, and it causes an autoimmune reaction, and the cells start fighting each other, and the body starts fighting each other. That's what the media does. We need to stop that. Stop being afraid of your neighbor. Stop being afraid of everybody. If you don't agree with something, stop being so quick to jump on it and yell at your friend or put them down or whoever you're talking to. I mean, some people say something and people in this country have been programmed to the point where they just assume everything. And America's really starting to get a reputation for that. Stop it. Stop assuming everything under the sun, okay? And stop being afraid. One of the ways that I can help you stop being afraid is by reciting the litany against fear for you all. Whenever you're afraid, whenever you start to feel anxiety or whatnot, you don't always have to pop a pill. Recite this. Maybe this will help you. Here we go. The litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Stop being afraid, ladies and gentlemen. Stop fearing everything. Switch from the fear vibe to the love vibe. It's one of the simplest solutions I can offer you. It may sound cheesy, but it's 110% truthful and factual. With that, we're out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, till tomorrow night, I love you all. Do your research, and don't be afraid to love one another. I'll catch you all again live tomorrow night. I'm out.